we open wide the virtual stage where ideas spark and wisdom fills the page. From the UK to the land of maple trees, John and Mike bring clarity with ease. We're building meetings, webinars with might, helping you shine, your message taking flight. Whether you're new or you've done this before, Lord Zoom Live will help you do much more. We're building meetings, webinars with might, helping you shine, your message taking flight. Whether you're new or you've done this before, Lord Zoom Live will help you do much more. Thank you for joining us, we're glad you're here. Together we grow, it's loud and clear. On Zoom we connect, we learn, we grow. Welcome my friend, enjoy the show. From big events to breakout rooms with flair, we've got the tools and we're ready to share. Guest experts drop in, bringing gold each time, with insights and tricks to help you climb. Can't make it live, we've got you still. On YouTube and LinkedIn, we're giving that thrill. So tune in later or catch us next round. Either way, your success is where we're bound. Thank you for joining us, we're glad you're here. Together we grow, it's loud and clear. On Zoom we connect, we learn, we glow. Welcome my friend, enjoy the show. And make it live, we've got you still. On YouTube and LinkedIn, we're giving that thrill. So tune in later or catch us next round. Either way, your success is where we're bound. Now take the spotlight, the stage is yours. Bring your message through virtual doors. Each week we gather, and now you know you're not alone, so let it flow. Thank you for joining us, now go and shine. Share what you've learned, your voice, your time. With Lord Zoom Live, your power will grow. It's time to build your own show.
Hello, welcome to another Lord Zoom Live. Today we're going to be talking about Zoom events, and I want to encourage you to use it. But before I do, I'm going to have to make an apology. It's very complicated. Over the years, you've asked for, can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do something else? And Zoom has added the features. It's got quite big, it's got quite complicated, it's got quite advanced. And for us that are in the environment day to day, it's fine. It's just another feature. But I can understand that those people taking on a webinar or a Zoom event for the first time, it can be overwhelming. So my simple task is to help you find a simple way to make use of this product to ease you in and not scare you. And then all the added features are just tools you can use later, and they don't have to flummox you at the beginning. So let's have a look at the website, zoom.us, which is where your main account sits. And in that, you will find your options given to you. So I can go in and schedule a meeting. I'm sure you know this screen very well. I've got my main options here to schedule my meeting. And we know most of these, although some people probably, there's some there they don't recognize, but there are a lot of simple things to use meetings for. And this is very different too if I go to this tab, which is the main screen. If you go in and say, I want to create an event and I don't know what I'm doing, I just want to have all the options. It's a completely different screen, but you don't need to use that one. Because if you have a look at the sidebar where you've got your webinar meetings and Webinar Plus and events, if you're just going to be doing a simple webinar, you can go into here, and here's one I had prepared earlier, and you can see that this webinar creation button is pretty similar. Okay, it's got a few more buttons, but it's got a similar look to a normal webinar. So we can put in the basic information here, and we have, just by filling in this screen, we've got our webinar started. Then you can go and have a look at all the other extra features. So to get a basic webinar up and running is not much harder than setting up a meeting. And I'm going to take you through all these options on this screen so that you can feel assured that this is a nice and simple way to get into the system. The first thing we have is a difference between what webinars can do and what meetings can't do. And that is the option to go Simulive. Now, Simulive is when we start the webinar with a recording. At the end of that recording, we can choose to go live or to end it. But Simulive is only available if you've gone from webinars and you have a Webinars Plus or events license. That's why there's a little premium box here. It caught me out when I first saw it. I had to think about it, but that's why it's there. And then after that, we have some typical questions which you would have seen in meetings, like the topic. You can add a description. And this is your savior, not for today, but for the future. You can, just like in Zoom meetings, create a setup that you like and then save it as a template. Then you can recall that template again and again. And therefore, you don't have to keep putting in everything from scratch and then forgetting one of the options you should have set. So once you had this one webinar started, you can save it as a template. Then we've got the date and the time and the duration. And yes, like Zoom meetings, even though you say that's when it's going to start and when it's going to end, you can choose to start it a bit earlier, a bit later. You can make it go on longer. These are not set in stone values. These are just values set up so that everybody knows when you expect the webinar to exist. And like a meeting, it can be reoccurring. And we can set the frequency and we can set the number of times. And by the way, you can return to a meeting or webinar 60 times. That's the limit. But once you've used up some of those recurrences, you can actually extend the date as well and build it on if you wish to. Then we have a registration option. Now, registration for webinars and events can be more detailed than meetings. There's a lot more in it, but for a lot of us, where we're just doing a webinar and just having a registration form, it's very simple. But the registration process is much more broad. There's a lot more that we can do, and we'll have a look at those things when we get to that. But I'm just going to say it's required for now. I'm going to turn off the recurrence so that it doesn't ask me all the other questions. And we have a webinar password. It all looks very similar, but we've got a couple of extra things here. We've got the ability to start something called Backstage, or we can have a practice session. It's a bit of a misnomer to me. Practice session means that you could start the webinar earlier and test it out with all your users. Let your panelists know what it's like to be in the system. And then you can do the webinar later or another day even. Backstage, that's quite clever. Backstage gives us a sort of breakout room, but it's a breakout room only for panelists. And the panelists can actually watch and listen to the main presentation on the main stage at the same time. So it's a green room, effectively. But Backstage, again, if you've only got a webinar license, you can't use Backstage. You have to have a Webinars Plus or Events license attached to this to use Backstage. The next questions are all about the video quality. So we can enable HD video for all our content. And our webinar will then be full HD 1080p, which is a big improvement to those people, which are quite a lot of them only using 720, only using the 720p settings for their meetings, because most people are just using it. We've got the ability to make it a webinar on demand. That means that people could watch it later on demand, but there are limitations to that. As standard, you can have 300 people watching webinars on demand a month before you have to upgrade to another license. We can ask for the webinar to be automatically recorded. I'm always automatically recording my webinars. It is much better for me to record something I didn't need to or stop a recording than it is to, and I've done it once in 5 years, suddenly get to the end of a webinar and realize I've never pressed record. So we can automatically record the webinar, and we can automatically record the webinar both at our, let's move my other mouse out of the way, otherwise you can confuse you having two mice. Well, it is for me, it probably is for you. We can automatically record in the cloud or onto our computer. Again, the recordings that we have available to us are due to our settings, but there are more options in the cloud than there are on our computer. We can block people from certain countries if we wish to, and we can set some basic rules for the chat. We can have alternative hosts, so we can have other people working with us as hosts to make things work. We've got language interpretation and sign language possible. Now, there is more questions than you have in meetings, but it's not really onerous. I think you would agree that that is a pretty simple set of questions to work through. It's nowhere near as scary as, dare I share with you? Yes, of course I do. I like scaring people. If I showed you where we would go to, otherwise, we can end up with all these questions. You can see there's a whole load of questions about the intent type and everything around it. This is the full-blown set of questions for setting up an event. We are going to keep away from that. We're going to deal with this one. So that is the basic settings, and that is enough for us to start a webinar. All the other defaults will be there. We can hit schedule and it says something went wrong. So that's good, isn't it? What have I better push the date out a bit. That will help. And did I leave this page up too long before we started the demonstration? Quite possibly. So let's just hit it as it is now. Okay, so that's my password program trying to help me with passwords I'm not even using, but never mind, we'll ignore that. This is now my webinar. And you can see there's a whole load of tabs across the top. And this is where you have the differences between Zoom meetings and Zoom webinars. Now, we have a set of tabs across the top for Zoom meetings as well. So this isn't something completely new, but there are a few extra things in here. So let's just have a look at what the summary screen is. And this is including all the information we've had before. And this would be pretty much what you would expect to see in a meeting. By the way, I'd like to throw this in now. It is possible to convert a webinar to a meeting or a meeting into a webinar. It takes all the details with you. You can even take a webinar and upgrade it into an event. If you create the wrong one, it is possible to change. Something which people tend to ask, and I never remember, so I'm mentioning it now. So this is good enough that I can hit backstage, because remember I said I chose the option for backstage, so my panelists can have their green room. I can start backstage so my panelists can get in the green room before I start the webinar. But we're not going to do that. We're going to go through some of the other things just to give you an idea of what's available. First of all, the invitations. So I've got a webinar here with a limit of 1,000 attendees, and there's my link to join the webinar. And I've said no registration required because I didn't set any settings. So that is the link, and that will get them into the webinar. Don't bother copying it. This webinar's not staying up. But if I edit the registration settings, I then have, and again, this is pretty similar to some of the things we have in meetings. So I can say the registration is required. I can choose whether I'm automatically going to approve everybody. I can send an email to the host whenever I get a message saying somebody's joined. That is very useful. I can restrict the number of registrants. Okay, my license says I've got 1,000, but maybe I don't want 1,000 people to turn up, so I only want 500 people to be able to come to my event. I can allow panelists to join from multiple devices. Sometimes this is a good idea, sometimes this is a bad idea, but it's up to you. You can show the join information on registration page. Now, if you do this, then people who register just before the webinar will get the link straight away on the registration page. If you don't click this, then they will have to wait until they get the email. The good side of that is they have to be given you a legitimate email to get the email to get into the meeting. If you allow people to see the join link on the confirmation page, they can fib about what their email address is and still get into the meeting. Therefore, you can't follow them up. You can put your socials in your page. If you've set your socials, if you haven't, it's going to look silly. Then you've got to say a disclaimer. You've got some tracking pixel options here. So we can put a tracking pixel in if you want to track people. And you've also got a registration successful page. You can send them on to a successful registration page. What are they going to ask you? Well, you might notice all these really what your company is and all the sort of things that Zoom asks you when you do a Zoom webinar. Well, this is where you get these options. But you can keep it simple and just ask them for their last name. And then you don't have to answer all these questions. You don't have to ask them. If you ask them, then you have the choice of saying, so if I want your phone number, I can ask your phone number. If I want to make sure that you give me a phone number, I can make it required. If you don't fill it in, you can't join the webinar. So we've got all those standard questions. As I said, they're the questions that when you subscribe to a lot of Zoom webinars, you see them all the time. The other thing you can have is custom questions. So you can add questions of your own. Quite often, I will ask questions about what people are looking for the webinar or what type of business they are. So I can ask questions like that, very similar to poll questions in a way. You've got a short answer. You can give a single answer where you give them some set of buttons. You can give multiple answers. So it's very much like a poll question in a way. And that information will then allow you to filter through your customers. That's the invitation section. Next, we're going to talk about the emails. Now, a lot of people keep complaining when they're running webinars in the Zoom meetings program that they don't have much control about how people are going to communicate with them because they want to remind them and say things like that. There are some simple things within Zoom meetings, but in Zoom webinars, we are at another level of emails. So we've got a whole set of basic, and this is just the basic version. So we've got a whole set of emails here. So we can change the email contact, which means your host of the webinar might not be the person who's actually organizing the webinar and is going to be managing it. So you can change that email contact. We can send a custom email to our participants so that they can get their own special invite. We've got a confirmation to the registration people as well, which we can see what it looks like. So I can send one to myself. Or I can go into here and I can edit it. Again, we are only talking about the basic version of Zoom's webinar here, and it's already looking better, I think, than Zoom Meeting, but it is still similar to Zoom Meeting. We've also got our reminder emails. So we've got a chance to come back a day, a week, or an hour, so we can send these reminders, and we've got the ability to add bits in between the standard content from Zoom to put in extra information. And this is just like Zoom meetings can do. But there's a very big difference between this messaging and the messaging for meetings. When you set up the meetings emails and the messages, you're setting it for all of your meetings that you run, all of them. When you set up these emails for Zoom webinars, you are customizing the message for every single webinar. So each webinar or each webinar series, if you're running a series, or each template of webinars you're running can have, even at this simple level of webinars, can have its own separate message. And that makes it much more powerful. That gives it another level of sophistication to Zoom meetings. And if I use the right mouse, things will happen on the screen. There we are. And again, we've got, oh, missed it. Try again. I can send a follow-up message to attendees. So I can chase them up, thank them for being part of the webinar. Wonderful. Our waiting room, again, there's a bit more customization, but it's personal to this webinar. That's what's important. Branding, again, is similar, but it's personal to this webinar. I should get you all to shout it together, really, shouldn't I? Polls and quizzes. Again, this is typical to what we've had in Zoom meetings. But remember that now Zoom allows us to put these polls in a central place, and therefore we can make more use of them. We have a survey for the end of the meeting, and you can use the survey system which Zoom has built in, which is simple questions, or if you prefer it, you can connect to a third-party survey. We have Q&A. Now, a lot of people will not have the experience of Q&A in Zoom meetings because not all Zoom meetings license have the ability to use Q&A. But Q&A means that not only have we got the chat area, but we've got a place where people can ask questions. And these questions can be anonymously asked, or you can turn that off. And you can keep the questions private, and attendees can only see when they're answered, or they can see all the questions. The advantage about if all attendees can see all questions is you can have an upvote and a comment on them. What that means is people can vote for the most commonly asked question, which if you've got lots of questions, that could be useful for the audience, helping you filter the ones that they are most interested in. But the attendees can comment is also useful because it allows a conversation in the Q&A for people who know answers to questions to throw in their comments or add comments to those questions. Maybe they've got a similar experience. So the Q&A is really important for building that sort of conversation with people at a Q&A level, and then leaving the chat for the, the banter. The resources tab is also powerful because it allows us to put links, documents, and speaker bios in a little box at the bottom of Zoom. I was tempted to then say, of course you've seen it, but I'm not sure how many of you have seen it. If you have, make a comment, because it's not used that much yet. But you can put links, documents, and speaker information. The really neat thing is, though, that you can pre-populate this, as I've got the ability to do here, before the meeting starts. Sorry, the webinar starts. You can actually add these live while the webinar is going, but just creating them isn't enough. you have to activate them, which means I can create a whole set of links and documents that will be needed throughout my webinar, but I only give access to the information when I want to give access to the information. So if I upload some documents for speaker 1, speaker 2, speaker 3, I can release them when speaker 1, speaker 2, speaker 3 speak. I don't have to make them available straight away. That, to me, is a really neat feature. Then we've got some more edge case systems, shall we say, so we can set up the captions. We can live stream this to various places. Also, once our webinar gets the limit of how many people can attend, you've got a way to send them on to those streaming services so they can watch it somewhere else. And then we've got the ability to add integrations from elsewhere. But that is the basic of webinars. And it's not that difficult to set up. Most of the things there, if you don't use them, you don't have them. And so for a lot of people, that is enough. But let's do something a little bit cheeky now. So I'm going to go now to this is the big end. So you know I said you can go from meeting to webinar, webinar to a meeting. So I could click on here and I could take my simple webinar, which I think was that one, and I can now turn it into a full fat event. And there it is. So I now have all of the features that I may ever want. But you see, it's a single session, full virtual event. It's kept its character and it's just become now on the hub. So this is now within my event portal. If I now go and edit it, I've got some more things I can play with. And this screen, if I'd taken you to it straight away, I think you would have found it intimidating. Frankly, I still find it intimidating with all these buttons down the side. But you don't need to come in and do this. You see, if you want to create this in here, you get a screen that looks very similar, but is quite intimidating. So I often create my webinar in the simple version, and then I will add all the bells and whistles I need when I do it. And when, of course, I've got it as I want, I will then save it as a template, or I will use the duplicate feature. And either way, I can then keep reusing the same event over and over again. But this is the full fat version of the system. So it's taken us 10 or 20 minutes talking through everything to get to this stage. But what we've created already is good enough to be used. You can see I've got a dates link here. All the dates and times. There's my join link for people to join. What I haven't got is I haven't got this on my hub profile page. So you have a hub events page where you can put all your events so people can go to that page and they can see all the events, all the webinars that you're running. You can publish or not publish your webinars to that page, depending on if you want people to see it or you don't want people to see it and you're going to invite them another way. And if I want to see what it looks like on my hub, there's my preview button for my preview hub. I can click on it and up comes a little message. And this is my hub. All right. Which of course is empty because I didn't ask it to publish and I haven't customized it. So this is just my hub, which I can now play with and use. And all I need to do is turn that on like that. And it would add to the hub. But we're going to make it more interesting. Let's have a look at some of the other things you can do once you go up to this level. So you would consider yourself now on the events platform, you would consider yourself not running a webinar now. This is a webinar plus, at least a webinar plus. As it's single session, it is a webinar plus. If it's multi-session, and what I mean by that is a all-encompassing event with a number of webinar or meeting sessions inside that one event. That's what a full event would be. We're using a single session webinar, so we just have one webinar for our event. There's nothing else going on. It's just happening once, and then there's nothing else encapsulated around it. So we are in the world at the moment of Webinar Plus. And you can see this is nice summary screen here, which overview, which effectively links to what's going on here. But let's just have a look at some of the clever little things we can do if you want to take this up to another level. So the playing around with this and the number of attendees is the same, but there is an oversell option, which allows you to sell more tickets than the people to turn up. Doesn't stop Zoom limiting you to what you have. So if you have a 1,000-seat license, 1,000 people can only get in the room, the virtual room, of course, but only 1,000 people in the room. If I limit it to 500, like I did, then I can, except that was the one I broke and I had to start again. But if I limit it to 500 people, that's up to me. But I can't go above my license. But what I can do is I can say I can oversell tickets. And if I oversell tickets, and look, there's a reminder just popped up on the screen. Oh, didn't see that bit. But there's my reminder just popped up on the screen to tell me this webinar is going because I set it for 10 o'clock, which is in a few minutes. So I can set a registration limit and I can allow oversells. That's different. I've got the ability to take this to the next level. So if this is a in-person event, I can actually make Zoom administer an in-person only event, which is a feature of webinars. We can also have a hybrid, so we can have it look at people physically and people online. We won't go into that for today because that is just too complicated. We've got the ability to add a company logo, which is going to be specific to this webinar, not to everything. Remember, in meetings, when you create things like this, they are generic for your whole account, not for individual meetings. When we're in webinars and events, we can make content especially for your event, not the same as everybody else's. So if you're running 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 15 different types of events on an ongoing basis, they can all have their own graphics, their own logos, their own questions, their own content. We can also take the free label away when you're not selling tickets, because we can sell tickets now. So we can charge for these events. And the categories thing here is if you've got a hub and you want to categorize all your different events in your hub so that people can search for a particular type of event, you can create some categories and then you select the ones you want here. So the event configuration, there's a lot of things there, but again, you add them if you need them, but there's a lot more there. Event branding, we have a nice layout that we have, a simple but nice layout that we have where we can set the colors, the color scheme. So we're customizing. Again, we're customizing for our system. And when it comes to registration, we have the ability to administer and control these registrations much more to a much more higher level than a normal meeting. We've got that group link. We've got the registration required. We've got the registration information, which we had a look at earlier. And we've got the geo-targeting, which we talked about earlier, and we've got the registration and when it ends, etc. But we've also got the ability to actually, thank you, save those. We've also got the ability to manage our registrations to a much better degree. So we've got the registrations, we've got the orders, we've got the refunds, because if we're selling tickets, then we could have refunds as well. So we've got a much bigger chance here to really granularly involve ourselves in the registration. We can even pre-register people. So I can get a list and put them into the system straight away, register them myself. Then Zoom will send them out invitations. Once we get to the event experience, we've got the lobby, which is a much more posh world than the waiting room, really, because it's actually a landing page in itself that you can have people go to so they can see what the event is all about. And then when we get to the meeting of the webinar, this is allows us to define the waiting room like we've had before. But it also just gives us all the confirmation on those little questions that it asks you at the bottom of the meeting about the type of event, etc., etc. That's where you've got these options that we've had before. There's even some moderation. So we can add some moderation to control people. I always have lovely attendees. I've never had to worry about that. Thank you very much for being wonderful people. And then when we get to the session section, this is where we have those questions which we talked about earlier in the standard version of the webinar. So we've got the branding, the live streaming, the captions, the recordings to allow us to edit all of those. We can add speakers. So we can create a speakers list. And again, we can upload the file to do that, or we can do that by hand. And then we have special roles. So the special roles allows us to add more of a team, shall we say, to help us with the administration. For instance, we have a Mike hiding in the background at the moment. He's going to be out in a minute, don't worry. Who's administering and doing all the controls for me. This is the email section. We can have a much more controlled system now. We're in Webinars Plus than the webinar. The webinar emails were customizable, but they were a similar look and feel as the meeting webinars. But they were customizable for each webinar, whereas the meeting ones are for all meetings. Once we get to here, we've now got the ability to edit the emails, and it should send me to the email builder. I'm saying should because I haven't actually launched it in this account before, but it has. So I now have an email builder. I'm not going to play around with it. I'm not going to give you any details on it, but just to say that we have a way now that we can add sections and we can basically design our email to a much more granular degree than we could in standard webinars and meetings. And that's not just for that email. We've got a whole set of emails here that we can send out. So we've got the invitation to go out to everybody. We've got a different one for the speakers. We've got one for interpreters, for moderators. We've got a pre-registration confirmation email. We've got a ticket confirmation if it's free. We've got a ticket confirmation if it's paid. I like the fact that you can send two different types of tickets, emails, depending if people are free or paid. And we can deactivate any of these emails. So if we don't want a particular email to go out, we can deactivate it and it won't go out on your system. Then we've got a set of reminders emails. So we can have a reminder email one day before. And again, these all look the same until you customize them. So we've got the information. You can fill the settings in at the left. We've got all the information we fill in. We can change the style. This is the same as the other one. We can add sections. We can add content. We can customize the email to be looking how we look. But you can't change this bit at the bottom because remember, the email is being sent by Zoom, not by you. Some people wonder why Zoom is at the bottom. That's because these emails are coming from Zoom. This is a Zoom invite, not your invite. And then we've got some notifications, which are for you to control when things happen. Difficult to describe that without going into too much detail. We've got the ability to add our survey. And then after that, it's analytics. How many people attended, how long they stayed, and all that sort of information, which is just actually been redone by Zoom. It's a much more attractive and much more informative layout now than it used to be. But that's a lot. It's a lot of options. That's where they are. But as I said, you can start with a simple webinar and work up from them. So that's what I think of it. But I think we better find out what Mike thinks of this particular system. And I'm guessing he's going to remind me that I haven't talked about something that he uses. But let's see what he says. Welcome, Mike. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you, John. I've been in the background watching everything and switching as necessary. So what is the question you have for me?
What are the features which you find are most useful when you're running webinars as opposed to meetings?
Features that I find interesting. Okay, so again, as many do know that I do have an events license like John was showing us today. So I do take advantage of Webinar Plus for the majority of our webinars. So the biggest feature I would say that does an awesome job of mimicking for our use case is Backstage, so that I'm able to bring in people into Backstage and then also be able to check them ahead of time, make sure that their video is good, make sure that their audio is good, and that they've got all their information in place. Should they have to share, like John is sharing with us today, John and I talked about that in Backstage to make sure that I know that, okay, John has something to share. And especially considering I'm using the next feature, which I'll talk about here momentarily, which is what we're using for today. That is my other favorite feature. But so again, in Backstage, I'm able to prep John ahead of time. You know, he told me that he had to share. He told me, you know, his camera is doing certain things. And today your camera is actually doing some really interesting things during the show. Actually, John, I don't know if you noticed or not, but that's okay. It was different. It was engaging. But in the regards of, yes, that is the perfect time to do some technical checks. We use that quite a bit. And of course, the other feature that we've been using for today, as you can see right now, that we've got the share still showing, and there's John and I below, we're using Production Studio. So again, that's the other big plus that we love with, thus the word Webinar Plus, to be able to do Production Studio capabilities so that I can make the content more engaging, more enjoyable. And when there are certain times where the share should not be showed, we're not showing it. If there's certain times we are, that the share should be full screen, I've been taking that full screen so that you can actually see specifically what John was showing you. And again, we do this a lot with our dealers, especially if we're doing tutorials with them. And there's an interface of some sort that we are showing them. We want to make sure that they see that. So it allows me to take that full screen and also still have the capabilities of the presenter to still be there. It doesn't put the presenter over top of the anywhere in particular like other video switchers can do. But again, for our needs, there isn't that recommended necessity to actually have myself over embedded in the bottom right corner, as an example, where John is on this page right now. There's a lot of white space in the bottom right corner. I could be, you've seen it quite quite often where people will make my head just a circle and will put themselves down there in the bottom right hand corner. But again, you could run into a problem where all of a sudden that could be a potential spot where John was going to focus, and now all of a sudden he's covering it up for the audience. So again, you have to be careful on the production level to make sure that your webinar comes across properly and is engaging and entertaining to a point, so that, especially if it is a tutorial based type webinar such as what we're doing today, that you will understand and see properly the specific locations that John is highlighting to make sure that you're able to make the modifications where you need to make those modifications. So those are my big two, John.
Okay, so let's go back through those again then. Backstage is this virtual green room that Mike loves. As he said, we can have a conversation behind there. What he didn't hint at, and of course he didn't hint at because we don't need it as there's only two of us today, but that green room is available during the whole webinar. And that means if you have multiple speakers, the multiple speakers who are not on stage, don't need to be on stage, don't need to be until 2 or 3 hours maybe into a webinar. They can stay in the green room, or they can not even be at the webinar. And when they join the webinar, they join to the green room. They join to backstage. They can then have a conversation with whoever tech is looking after the backstage area. And they can have those conversations not only like Mike and I did before we started the webinar, they can have those conversations during the webinar, and that backstage isn't in the webinar. They can't be seen, they can't be heard, they can't break anything. You can even screen share in there to make sure that your screen share works. It's all fine, and none of it can be seen until you get on stage. And the interesting thing about being on stage that Mike and I are now is that I am screen sharing this screen to show you how all these things work. But because Mike is controlling Production Studio, which I'm just going to enable in a second so that you can see how it sort of works, he is controlling what you, the audience, see. Now, I can see Mike on my monitor down there, and I can see myself, and I can see what you guys are seeing live. But you guys can only see the screen that's been chosen by Production Studio by Mike. So if Mike goes to adjust me screen, I'm not hinting to do that, Mike, but if he goes to adjust me screen, then you would just see just me. If he goes to the setting we have now, where we've got the two of us underneath the picture, that is his choice. So Mike, I'm going to open up the Production Studio button, and would you like to explain what's going on here, as you the guy that uses it all the time?
Sure. All right. So John usually sets up the template for me, but he's going to walk us through right now. So there's the different templates as we go through. And again, I'm going to walk John through this quite a bit. John, just build them a couple of the different templates. So again, so right now we've got the full screen one, and then you've got the other one there as well. And I will just take that full screen so that everybody can see that. Go ahead, John.
Sorry, I was typing on the wrong keyboard.
Yep.
So I'm creating some scenes, and the scene is effectively a layout. And I'm leaning over because this is on the other computer. So I've just done a one speaker scene. I could now do a screen share, if I choose the one that Mike was showing just now. So I could choose this scene. So you've got content shared by the presenter, and then we can have a number of people underneath. So that could be the second scene that I choose. So Mike can then switch between these scenes, which is what he's been doing all the time. Now, I've chosen one with 4 people underneath. One of the neat things, probably the neatest thing about this version of Production Studio is it is responsive to the number of people you select. So if we only select 2 speakers to be down the bottom, we don't get two speakers and then two blank boxes, we just get two speakers and the blank boxes disappear. So Mike doesn't have to worry about having the extra speakers there because they won't be seen. Maybe I'd give him a scene to play with where we're all on the screen together. But I could choose that one because that way, if we have a guest, Mike's going to have a chance to put in another box. If we don't have a guest, it'll just be the two of us. And once I've created these, and I think we've got something like 11 or 12 in our production for this particular webinar, these are all saved. And then Mike can select them as he needs them to run the production. So we can control exactly what you, the audience, see, independent of the number of people on screen or what screen shares we've got live. Don't have to keep unsharing and resharing my screen because Mike is just going to choose the screen layouts that look best for the situation. And so I tend to get a shopping list at the end of each webinar from Mike of the different angles or different things he would like to have in the system. Because the one thing this can't do, and actually I find it's an advantage because it stops you playing around, you can't create this scene list while the event is live. You have to create it before. You don't have to specify everybody in all the boxes, so you don't have to specify all the speakers in advance if you don't want to, but you have to have generated the layout scenes that Mike's going to use. And the other things that you can have is you can have people, you can have screen shares, you can have images, and you can have videos. Now, you can't have as many videos as some people would like, but that's a limitation that Zoom has put on us, I think, probably just to keep us all under control. And then one of the things they've recently added is you can see some scenes here where, how can I put this politely? It's a bit more jazzed up. So if I add another scene, and it's actually put it in already for me. So if you see this scene here, so this scene here is a bit more, I say it's a bit more jazzed up because all the other scenes they've had up to now, all the speakers have been in one certain size box. But we've got recently an update with some different size boxes that mean that you can have the speaker as a big box and then all the other panelists as a smaller box. So I do like that. And let's just show you the media ones. So we've got effectively just an ability to play a video. One with a border, one without a border. This is the image one. And the video is exactly the same, except with the videos, we can have some speakers. Hold on. It's not behaving itself. Yes, it is. That is not video tiles. Anyone else would agree to me? That's not video tiles, is it? So this link is not working so well. Okay, yep. My bad. I'm thinking backwards. Those video tiles. That is media. We can set a speaker for the media, or we can just have it coming up. For some reason, I'm not seeing the videos. So I'm either going blind or I've missed them out. Let me just try that again. Yeah, it's not showing me the videos. It does work usually, I promise. But we'll forget that doesn't work. So there is the ability to add videos and then you can upload the videos, but I'm not seeing them on the list properly. And I don't know why. So considering the problems we've had tonight running this and getting it working, I'm not surprised that something didn't work then. So once we've given those settings, we've taken those and we've turned them into scenes, then it's all over to Mike. And during the event, Mike can run those or not. We can start Production Studio and stop Production Studio to have those layouts, or we can go back to the traditional webinar layout, and then you just see all the speakers and you can spotlight them, and all those things are available. But Production Studio is that's a good choice, Mike. It's changed the way this works. And by the way, it works in the cloud. So there's no big extra requirement for some really powerful piece of hardware to run some complicated piece of software, which may do some more amazing things. There are lots of production software applications out there, but Zoom's runs in the cloud. So it's just the layout on the screens you're looking at. It's not the processing being done on your laptop, desktop, or whatever. It's just the layout that you're designing. And when Mike's running it, he's just choosing what layout he wants, and then the cloud is bringing the content down and making it all work for us. So I think those are two really good examples of what we would use the most in running webinars. And I assume, Mike, that as you run webinars on a regular basis, you use this ability to create something and then duplicate it and make templates, so you don't have to worry about doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, we I will make a default webinar that will be in the future, like you similarly did during the demo, and basically make that one, and then that one will be templated, so that it makes my life a lot easier in the future. Again, because we have multiple brands, I will make multiple templates for each brand. And as John was saying, that it is brand based. So again, the template will hold the branding for each webinar template. So that will follow that. So that all is definitely easy, made life a lot easier for us to template the webinar. Again, if it's going to be a webinar format, not a meeting format, if it's going to be a webinar format, then we have a template ready to go, and the dealers enjoy the interactivity that we've got between the panelists and such, depending on the special guests that we have, or if it's just us discussing things with our dealers in a stage form type situation, where if we had them all in a big banquet room and we would be up on stage, that would be where we envision webinar to be used for the most part for us.
And one of the neat things about the template, which I've just taken my webinar here and said I want to create a template, is you have so you have a name for it, a description. That's really expected. What I love is these options at the bottom. So remember when I worked through the creation of this webinar, I went through the different sections down the side. Well, when you create a template, you have the ability to select or deselect those options. So if you don't want the template to contain some of the information about the branding or the registration, because you don't want that particular bit to be copied across from one thing to another, you can uncheck these buttons and therefore lose that information so it doesn't appear in the template. And then you can use the template from that level. I've found that really quite useful. I can also duplicate an event using a similar process. But what I found was really interesting, of course, was if I duplicated the event and I was asked the other questions, it would also include the list of people I invited, so I could uncheck that so they weren't automatically invited to the next version of the event.
Right. In our situation, that benefits us because they would be.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I love, because you've got both options.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But as we've said, these are the things that we like. We like Production Studio. We like the way it's laid out. We like the customization. But as we started, as I told you, maybe an hour ago now, you don't have to answer all these questions at the beginning. If you want to create a simple Zoom webinar, you can start with almost the same questions as you have for a meeting. And then you can start customizing the bits as you need them. And when you have something that works, you can duplicate it or you can template it. That means that somebody in your organization could be responsible for creating these templates, and then they can hand them out to other people to use them. If you've got multiple Zoom event hubs in your organization, you can transfer these from one to another. So it is very easy to use, and it's an incremental experience. Start with the simple, build up to the complicated. That's all I have to frighten you with today. Mike, what is it that I've missed that I should have highlighted that you like?
Without going into more depth, because we can, this would not be an hour show slash webinar plus. This will get you started. I would say would be the best way of saying this, John. This will get you started into it. And then you can get, as they say, lost in the weeds in the different settings, and you can tweak and tweak and tweak some more. That, I would say, John, is for a future show.
I just didn't stop when I was planning this. Keep writing a note going, oh yes, I need to do a video on just how you do that. Oh yes, I need to do a video just how you do that. Because I think that's the only way to do it. But I did feel that an overview would give you an experience of what it's like to set up. And as Mike said, once you've got these things set up, it doesn't matter how many brands or whatever you need, but once they're all set up, it takes me about 10 minutes to create a Lord Zoom Live webinar, because I'm using the same format over and over again, apart from when Mike says he wants some new scene layout because I've said something on he's seen better way of laying out the scene, so I'll create a new scene. But as far as the main things are concerned, I would just take a duplicate version of what I've created before. I'll change the name of it, the date, the time. I'll change the main image for it. If all my invites and all the other things are going to the same people in the same way, there is nothing else I need to change. So I can roll out one webinar after another in about 10 minutes. And I know I can do it in 10 minutes because I was anal enough to actually sit down and time myself last week. I can roll one out in 10 minutes. That includes going to Canva and changing the wording on my little graphic and then putting it in. So it's really very easy. If you've got somebody who can get through the first experience of getting your first one right, after that, it just gets easier and easier. And if there are other options you need, you just go into the settings. So thank you very much, Mike, for supporting me today.
Of course.
Thank you very much for everybody attending. Look out for the next Lord Zoom Live. And yes, our theme tune is an example of a video playing on the system. So that's how that works. It's just another scene. And therefore, there's nothing for me to say now apart from thank you very much and take it away, Mike.
Yeah. See you next time.
Every week we open wide the virtual stage where ideas spark and wisdom fills the page. From the UK to the land of maple trees, John and Mike bring clarity with ease. We're building meetings, webinars with might, helping you shine your message, taking flight. Whether you're new or you've done this before, Lord Zoom Live will help you do much more. We're building meetings, webinars with might, helping you shine your message, taking flight. Whether you're new or you've done this before, Lord Zoom Live will help you do much more. Thank you for joining us, we're glad you're friend, enjoy the show. From big events to breakout rooms with flair, we've got the tools and we're ready to share. Guest experts drop in, bringing gold each time, with insights and tricks to help you climb. Can't make it live? We've got you still on YouTube and LinkedIn. We're giving that thrill, so tune in later or catch us next round. Either way, your success is where we're bound. Thank you for joining us, we're glad you're here. Together we grow, it's loud and clear. On Zoom we connect, we learn, we glow. Welcome my friend, enjoy the show. And making life, we've got you still. On YouTube and LinkedIn, we're giving that thrill. So tune in later or catch us next round. Either way, your success is where we're bound. Now take the spotlight, the stage is yours. Bring your message through virtual doors. Each week we gather, and now you know you're not alone, so let it flow. Thank you for joining us. Now go and shine. Share what you've learned. Your voice, your time. With Lord Zoom Live, your power will grow. It's time to build your own show.